Thank you guys for joining us.
A nice monoscope.
So the way we usually start the startup grind is we ask our hosts to tell their story before they got to the point where they are now. So maybe start with you, Premysl.
Okay.
Where do you come from? How did you grow up?
Okay, yeah. I'm from Pardubice. I studied mathematics here at the nuclear faculty, Juricek. And then after 3 years of fighting with mathematics and not seeing really a future, I moved to France, to Paris, and I studied in France for 4 years, or studied and worked in France for 4 years. So one of the Grande École and studied mathematics once more. And so I got a diploma in Paris, and then working in Air France, working at Amadeus at French Riviera, a really nice place to be. And then I just wanted to move in my own business, so I actually met a French guy who wanted to start the Czech branch of his business. So I started at 25, 26, so from zero, IT services company in Czech Republic. It was quite successful, very nice lessons learned, because this IT services business is quite dirty business in terms of customers, hiring, problems, projects, and so on. And after a couple of years, after a couple of years, I actually wanted to move on my own projects, and I joined after I exited my share in the company in this IT services fund. I joined Rockaway Capital, and then after 2 years, I finally raised my own venture capital fund, or kind of founded it. And that's been already 3 years. I'm in the VC business, so meeting entrepreneurs, meeting startups, investing in it. Already 15 deals, more than 250 million invested in startups. I think one of the most active investors in Prague, basically. And I'm very well enjoying the journey. And finally, after this mathematics and stuff, I found the vocation, the vocation of the life. So really in the VC space for the long run, and enjoying talking to young people, to smart entrepreneurs, and so on. So this is my experience, my journey.
How was your, the education that you received here at the Technical University? How did it help you actually in the career?
Quite painful, actually. I really enjoyed mathematics in the first 2 years because it was challenging. It was really about brain power, and I was kind of. I wanted to join Juricek, the nuclear faculty, because I knew it was the hardest school in Czech Republic, basically, at the time. So I said, okay, so I don't know what to do, so I do the hardest thing and I will see. But the thing is, the comparison between Czech Republic and France is that in Czech Republic, you don't really see how your education is related to the real world, which is your problem as well, I'm 100% sure. And for the mathematics, it's even harder, actually. So after a couple of years at Juricek, I was quite frustrated, not really knowing where my future is. But looking back then, I would say it formed my brain to have some structure and to really solve the most difficult problems, mathematically wise. And it formed somehow I wasn't used to work actually before I came to Juricek, because all the grammar school or the high school was quite easy, and the first few years was really difficult. So I got used to work somehow.
That's a useful skill. Okay, Vaclav, what about your story?
Well, it's maybe a little bit different. Let's see. So I'm from Žižkov, and I'm proud of that. So most people are like, "Is there anyone who actually comes from Prague?" So I am. My father actually studied the electrical engineering faculty, and he was like, when I was deciding after high school what to do, he was like, "Well, you can always learn all the management and economic skills and so on in like trainings at through the company, right? So why don't you go to the technical university?" Because I was in like mathematical class and so on, and so that's the tougher part. You do that first, and then later you can kind of get into the business, right? Which is exactly what he did. So I heeded his advice. I could choose between MAPFIS and FEL, so I ended up at FEL. And the difference between FEL and Jaderka is that FEL is the electrotechnical faculty, for those who don't know, right? Is that it's not that challenging. So I actually learned that after the high school, where my mom really always forced me to be on time and really well prepared. This time I just found out, in the beginning I was like, I need 4 days for the tough exams and 2 days to learn for the easy exam. Well, after the first exam period, I actually shrank that to like 2 days and 1 day at most. And after 2 years, when I was actually still in the old system, they actually, when there was this big exam after 2 years, and when I found out that I don't have to take it because I have a scholarship, I knew that they were not going to fire me anymore, right? So I joined the University of Economics as well, because I knew I was the guy who wants to do consulting actually, and perhaps I'm the technical guy with a bit more of the, interpersonal skills than some of the hardcore FEL guys who still wear the Swedish, shirts and so on. So I was like, okay, so let's do both schools at the same time. And I think that was actually a very good decision, because unfortunately there is no program which actually puts together, like you have just engineer in Germany. This doesn't exist at all in the Czech Republic. So you have to run between Davice and Žižkov. And it was actually very, very interesting, to see the completely different mindset. And actually that's what I took from this university, because I love energy and power engineering, which is what I studied. It's still my hobby, but I've never actually done it. But, the quantitative skills, the data-driven decision-making, and basically the ability to be able to just process the numbers very quickly, do quickly sizing, which is, crucial in the consulting. It was very helpful. On the other hand, I saw a lot of the technical guys, saying like, okay, we just do the hard work in MATLAB or in Excel, and then these guys who do the business, they earn 5,000-10,000 crowns more per month, and the only thing they can do is actually PowerPoint, right? And we'll get to that later, but I just thought that I could kind of get the best from both of the worlds, and that's what I did. So I studied for a year at the Union College, which was the best exchange at the CTU at the time in the States. Then I consolidated the studies a little bit, and I did a year in Germany, Erasmus, just to fix my German instead of partying in Greece, which was my other option. And then I wanted to extend my student life, so after I graduated from both universities, I actually went for an internship in Brazil for half a year. But then the typical way how the brain drain to Brazil happened to me as well, because I fell in love with a Brazilian lady, and I ended up coming back and living for 6 years in Brazil, doing many different jobs in management consulting, from boutique consulting to basically other types, and some business development in between. And then when I was already fed up with life in Sao Paulo, I just got back and I joined McKinsey here in Prague, which is the most famous management consulting firm, right? And I did 2 years in McKinsey, and then another 2 years as a freelance consultant all around the world. And then I just felt like, well, I'm not learning anymore. So, let's do also something, give something back a little bit as well. And I just wanted some new impulse. So I started doing two things. One was mentoring startups, like in the Baltics and in the Czech Republic here as well. And I was looking maybe for one to join, possibly, or some founder to co-found something with. And then also coach people who want to join either the management consulting firms or basically talented people in the Czech Republic to help them maybe a little bit think about their career and so on. Just the favor bank kind of style. And here I am. In the end, I joined Smart Guide, which was founded by my best friend. I studied with him at the Union College, and we did, the CTU together. And there are two more guys among the founders who also studied at the CTU. So and we sit in Incubate, in the accelerator of the Czech Technical University. And we finally, after advising people for so many years what they are supposed to do, I just rolled up the sleeves, and now I'm trying to do the heavy lifting myself, which is actually very, big learning curve as well. So here I am, and I'm trying to shape maybe a little bit also, let's say the discussion about how to maybe generate more ideas and more startups in the Czech Republic, and that's maybe a topic we could touch on also with
Definitely.
I'll give you a mic, so that's because of the recording, so they have better sound.
Okay. So I think it's interesting, very similar stories, that it's kind of like stage one, where you work for a corporate, both of you. Then stage two, you work for a startup, so you are still at stage two. And then the stage three is when you are the investor in the startup. But how can you compare what was your experience, the difference working in a corporate for a startup? What's better, what's worse? What would you recommend, for a graduate? Okay, you finish school, what is better? Go to a corporate or go to a startup? What is a faster learning curve, or what are the differences?
So that's exactly a question I very often get from the guys I say coach. Well, I always say that, not talking about investment banking, but if I compare management consulting to the startup, both have actually very steep learning curve, but it's a completely different skill set you get, right? So in the management consulting, you really try to steer the huge tankers by 1 degree somewhere, in the right direction. And the big corporates, right? You're trying to change something, you have a huge impact, and you're learning completely different skills, right? And it's actually exciting that you save $100 million, to a huge corporation. But again, it's something which, the skills you will use only when you kind of jump the boring entry-level jobs, and then actually it will become very helpful. But you have your drug, so to speak, is the impact, right? Which is huge. And a friend of mine who actually worked in McKinsey as well, when he joined a startup, he told me a funny thing, which I like. And he said, working in a startup after McKinsey, where, again, like they take care of you, and it's like a golden cage. You have support for everything. In a startup, it feels like you're running through a tunnel, which is completely dark, and you just keep tripping over stuff all the time, right? Because you have to deal with the basic things like the printer doesn't work, or like, I have to spend X amount of hours with whatever expensive accounting, anything. So it's a completely different learning curve. So you have to really decide for yourself whether you want to build your own stuff, which may be not that big, even when you scale it up, but which is your own, and that's what you care about. And it's the creativity and the learning, the agile learning in the process, failing and kind of learning from it. Or if your drug, again, is the impact and the size, and you want to work in the corporate, and of course might have much lower risk and so on, right? So that's for me the decision making.
I would say join a small company after or during the school, because you will learn much more things than in a corporate world. You might meet very different people who are actually not good managers, good leaders, but you will learn from them as well. And you have actually a very good chance to progress much faster than in a corporate world. And it doesn't need to be a startup, actually. I'm not pushing anyone to join startup, because the world is crazy, the startup world. But like a small, medium companies, when you have a direct touch with the owners, I think this is crucial if you want to be in a business for long term and not be just an employee number XY. Because it's very different to be really talking and interacting with the owners of the company and having their point of view. You will learn much more than being 8 levels below the owners or stakeholders or whoever. So I would definitely advise to join a small company to get the responsibility very early on. This will speed you up. in my point of view. And I'm not saying that the trainee programs of big corporates are bad. Not at all. I'm just like, my personal advice would be that.
Oh, sorry, just to add one thing, I completely agree. Actually, I've never worked in a corporate. Again, I just tried to help some of the corporates, right? And you really see the difference in the mindset. So you have now like the small teams which are much more progressive and open to innovations, which is actually a great thing, or like internal consulting departments of the big corporates they have completely different mindset as well. But I absolutely agree with Przemek. Like if you can much faster learn and, learn much closer to the decision makers in a small company, then with that skill set, you can actually enter later maybe into the big company, and you can again skip the boring entry levels and you get to something which is already much more interesting, right?
Yeah, it's like, I think the general rule of thumb, I'm just brainstorming, is that the closer you are to the owners of the business, the more you learn. And actually the biggest, one of the best paths I know is that you join a small company, you learn, then you start your own company, and then you exit your own company to the corporate, and then you become a VP of the big company. So you actually enter the corporate world already being just very close to the owners. And this is, and I think, like, try to think about this mindset, whether this shouldn't be your way. Like, it's not for everybody, but I think to be really in a business, it's crucial to get very early on to the founders, to the owners, to the real businessmen, and not be just led by corporate managers, because they just don't know.
Well, if I may add one more thing, like one big I struggle really with is recruitment at the universities here in the Czech Republic, because I think in general, as a national psyche, we're actually very risk adverse as a nation. And I really see that, like I went to recruit here, but especially at the University of Economics, during the big recruitment event, right, which takes 2 days. And these guys were there to really find a job, right? And I stopped them at the corridor and I told them, hey, I work for this, I think quite exciting startup. We are fully funded. We just raised whatever 600K in April. This was May, right? So I can pay you exactly as much as the corporate company, would actually for the summer, right? I'm looking for people who study, let's say, international, business, which is exactly what many of them actually did study, right? And still they rather go for the stamp of quality from the Procter & Gamble for the internship for the summer, instead of actually trying to learn way more during an internship, with ex-McKinsey, whatever, with quite experienced guys who would work really hand in hand with, and for the same amount of money, right? And actually at the time when they have the lowest opportunity cost, right? Because you get 200 crowns an hour, right? Like to join a startup when you're 35, your opportunity cost is way, way higher, right? So why don't you guys just try and feel it for yourselves, either part-time or just for one summer instead of the Procter & Gamble or Chess, stamp of quality, right?
Very interesting. So a lot of times we have founders for the interview who are have non-tech background, and usually one of the biggest obstacles for them at the beginning was that you don't have the tech background and you are building something related to tech. So you need people that you can rely on, and you need to learn a lot. Now I will turn this around, that I think a lot of people that have a technical background have a kind of fear that they don't understand business. They don't know how that works. How important is this for you when you are looking to hire a technical person, that they need to have some skills in this? And how can you overcome this gap?
Well, I don't know. For me, the people say the typical setup in a startup for the founders is to have 3 people, right? To have actually the CEO who takes care of the business and the fundraising and possibly the marketing in the beginning, right? Then you have the CTO who actually takes care of the technical part, and then you have the creative guy, right? Who typically has the idea, right? And of course, it can be only 2 persons if it's very technical, and the CTO is actually has the idea as well. Let's say for an algorithm or something which is actually value adding, right? But what I think is crucial is really what we also discussed before, is to help the people who want to start a business to find the partners from completely different background, right? Again, being it the business students or being it the creative people from whatever Charles University, it doesn't matter. I think that it's impossible to find people who can do everything, right? And you can outsource development of whatever app or something, or something in the IT, even though it's much more expensive. But I think you just need to complement, the founders, or just build a team well, right?
I will disagree here. I think, and it's shown on statistics about the global startups. I think the best setup is when the founders are technical originally, like tech schools, computer science. They even probably coded the first version of the product themselves, and then they were savvy enough to move to the business side and take the lead of the company. I think those tech guys who are able to basically jump into the business and to really to have customers in mind and technical people in mind and the product in mind are much faster in building companies. It's much easier to build your product. You have the idea of yourself than hiring anybody who, like a company, to actually realize what you had as idea. So I would prefer, or I always prefer, tech founders, like people who have the background, have the hard skills, and then they were actually talented enough to actually move to the business. And I would prefer those founders before that those are like only business, even though they are like a good sales guy, very good socially, whatever. But to building a tech business, I prefer tech founders, because the product in the very early days is so important. Then if the founder is able to think about the product from the technical point of view, it's much faster, much better, like much less risk for the company than the vice versa.
Yeah, I guess I was just saying something similar in a sense that it's good to combine possibly the two founders, the way that they complement each other. Or, yeah, I agree, like you have ways how to outsource your sales. I think outsourcing sales makes much more sense than outsourcing the development, actually, because, so I agree with you completely.
That was the way I was disagreeing, that it's not about, like you cannot outsource the development of the product, basically. Because the development of the product is the core of the startup. It's nothing else.
Yeah.
So how do you guys cooperate? Do you cooperate with the local Czech schools for like idea generation, or how do spin-offs work? Like if there is a spin-off from the Czech Technical University, is it investable for you at all? Does it make sense?
I will start here. Actually, I'm trying to help the tech transfer in Czech Republic. So sitting on board of some like tech transfer centers in several universities, even at like university hospital. And my original idea coming to the venture business was supporting scientists to bring their ideas to the market. It was a very bad idea, actually. So I actually slightly moved to the very standard venture business. What I think is there is no ecosystem for tech transfer. There is no ecosystem for any kind of like patents and technology transfer from the university and science to the market. It's very hard to invest in anything coming from the university. There is probably only company or only institution which is like the UOHB, the biochemistry institute here, which was basically successful in transferring something to Gilead and really earning so much money that they cannot spend it ever. And there is nothing else basically, and it's and the system isn't helping. So I'm really trying. Like I'm lecturing at universities, like giving lectures, like helping in those boards, and like helping to actually say what is investable and what not, and where to focus and where to not focus. But there are things like public money has been invested in this project for like 10, 20, 30 million. An IP was created. Then a small company came and just bought the IP for 100 crowns or 100,000 crowns. And the tech transfer office just saying, hey, we were successful in putting the product on the market. And I say like, no, you are just being like cheated. But they don't know. They are just not the business people. And unless on the tech transfer offices, they are not like business motivated and business oriented, it couldn't work. And there should be also a governmental money being actually poured on that to be able to take it off. We are kind of like 30 years behind Israel or like those type of countries.
Well, two things to this, if I may. Like one of our co-founders was the number 3 in cognitive security, which was one of the few spin-offs actually from the CTU, and they were bought by Cisco, right? And he still works there. And it was kind of random, right? I mean, it's, many years back, but it was just based on one personality, one professor who actually is one of the few people who you may know who actually does, quite interesting stuff here. And I'm not saying he's the only one, but,
No more here, basically.
Oh, it's true as well. Yeah, he is now a CTO of a very big company. Anyway, so yeah, it's one of the few examples. And I asked him today how it went, and he was like, well, it was kind of random, and still, the valuation and so on was, of course, already then negotiated by Credo Ventures, who joined into it, right? But like the university had pretty much nothing out of it, right? And that's, I was hoping that we are a little bit further, that because we can learn from the other countries, but I'm not really sure, we have if this is what we just heard from Przemek, right? Because the universities should take stake at in the spin-offs, right?
Like they shouldn't basically, but they should at least take something out of it.
Well, like I think if you look at like Stanford or Harvard, I think they actually take a stake as well, right? If you use their PhDs and so on. So,
But they have to be flexible enough to let go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Like just one thing to that. Like the best setup here in Czech Republic, if you ever want to do that, is to create a separate company, which is yours, and have an exclusive contract with the university that you kind of could use people from university or the IP from the university in exchange of some part of your revenues if the company takes off. By far, this is the best structure you can do. So like your own company and license contract with the university that you can use some of the IP you created probably on the university. And you are not stealing the IP, you are just licensing the IP. The IP is still the property of the university. And probably you can have an option to buy the IP from the university in case the company takes off. And there is an investor coming after some stages and say, hey, like we are not investing if you don't have the IP. And you say, okay, but we could actually buy the IP because we have it in the contract somewhere like 2 years. We signed 2 years ago. So this is the best way how to do that. Not getting university on board. This is very hard from the bureaucratic point of view. And there is no flexibility, as you said. So this is probably the only way currently how to successfully spin off a company from the university and not being like not steal the IP or not steal the people.
Yeah, I mean, university in that case got actually then like money for R&D from Cisco, so they had some benefit as well, but not direct, right? But I understand like this is much more flexible setup, right? Well, I just actually moderated a panel at one startup event in Berlin last week, and it was interesting because there was a guy who actually builds quantum computers in Finland, and he was saying, we have a great support from the university, which actually enables us to use actually kit worth like, I don't know how many millions of euros, right? And we can build the IP there together. And actually the Chinese, after they had to exit the US, us, they're actually throwing money at us, right? Like the problem is I have never heard of anything similar here, right? One thing is the topic, which we should somehow strategically choose that these are the few kind of focus fields where we should really go deeper, like the Finnish go on the quantum technology, for example. But, and I think that, that's a very different discussion, but like for you, I would just really think about, what are really what are going to be the hot technological topics in 5-10 years, which are kind of now starting, because that would be an interesting, area to focus on, right?
So both of you spent some time abroad. What was something that you really liked that we could, Czech Republic could learn from? And why is the international experience important? Like if you try to hire someone or you're looking at the founder, what does it give you?
Well, you learn so many different drinking games, right, from all around the world. No, it's just the side effect. Well, for me, it was really eye-opening when I went to study in the States. It was actually one of the very small liberal arts colleges in the Northeast, which refused to be part of the Ivy League, basically. Average size of class, 12 people. But that's not the key. But the key was like, you really saw what Premysl said, like why do you do that, right? Like it was not about understanding the principles, it was not about it was really about like, what is it for, right? So when we had the investments class, they just told us, go to the library and just find a benchmark for your discount rate, right? And then just justify why you chose that one. And that's up to you. Nobody tells you have to use 4.5% because of this and that, like you get in an assignment here, right? And it's just the real world's kind of approach, right? And so they don't really know always how. They don't have 3 ways how to calculate something, but they know that in this case, they should use this way to calculate. And in this case, they should use that one. And the third one is completely useless because you would need a supercomputer for that, right? Here you learn the 3 ways how to calculate, but you actually never know which one is actually practical to use and when, right? So that for me was the most eye-opening thing, that it was really very, very practical and just justify why you did it this way. And there was a lot of discussion as well. People had to be prepared. They had to read the reading material assignments before. And it's a really discussion, right? And everybody has to be ready, right? It feels like most Czech students really are more on a cell phone trying to multitask, which doesn't work, instead of really being ready and engaged in the discussion as well.
Like besides the French gastronomy, which I enjoyed a lot, there is one thing I particularly enjoyed in the schooling system at the engineering universities in France, is that the relationship with the business are quite extensive. There are top managers from the top companies sitting on board of those technical universities and actually setting the trends and saying, hey, in 10 years, the economy will be in that stage, and we will need this type of technology experts, and we need to start to actually teach this and that now to have that experts actually in 5 years. And I think, at least at my school, at the nuclear faculty, there is no such relationship between the school and the business, and I feel it's not good for every university. Like for the science, the pure science is and the basic research is not that important. But for the engineering schools, it's very important to have this relationship, and that's what I learned, and it's what I'm saying to everybody that hey, you need to have much more connection with the real world. While being at the university, there is no diploma thesis at the engineering school. There is an internship in the company, and you're basically, the work you are doing, it's like a full-time 6, 7, 8, 9 months at the company, when you are working really hard and you are actually part of the actual team. And so this is your final work at the university. It's like working full-time at the company. And just some people actually join the company after that, or some people just know that, okay, I would never work for this type of company because it was a bad experience. And it's already helped you. And it's not the case here, I think. And you are still writing your diploma thesis and it's basically useless 90% of the time.
I completely agree. Like, unless you really want to do PhD, and even in that case, like, it should be the last resort option to pick one of the topics, which was actually for the diploma thesis, which was actually proposed by the department, right? Like, you know, I don't see a reason why a good student, you know, should not actually write the thesis together with a company and actually be paid for that, right? At the same time, instead of filling filling stuff into the, into the shelves in the supermarket, kind of, and then writing a thesis on a topic which was actually proposed by the department, right? So yeah, I think that should be really 90% of the diploma thesis should be really linked to the real problems of the companies, right? So we have now one diploma thesis actually being just written by a student from Colombia who studies at the University of Economics about the market entry to Latin America, and I just hope we'll have more. So even we have a lot of technical topics. So if you're thinking about a topic, talk to me later.
Well, I think I can come. I cannot talk for all the companies, but we have a similar case. So we bought an industrial automation company in March, and we have a high school student who is now finishing the high school who came to the company saying, "Hey, I want to do my final project for the Matura with you. Is it okay?" And we were like, "Yeah, of course. Come on, let's do it." So I think if you go for the companies and you have some genuine interest, they'll be very happy to work with you on anything, and they will help you. It will start your career. So moving on, let's say that, people here decide, okay, yeah, this sounds good. This is interesting. So the first step, if they want to join a startup, what do you look for in a person that would want to join? And then, as you said, the path is you join the startup, you work there, you quit, then you start your own company. So once they start their own company, what do you look for in the founders? Why do you decide to invest?
So I'll just answer, of course, the first one. Well, it's very simple, right? Like, the most important is the motivation, right? Like, in a startup, you have very few bullets, so to speak, to shoot, of the target, because you have very limited budget and, size of the team. So you cannot really miss-hire, because it really sets you back in terms of the timeline, right? It's because you don't have 5 people doing the same stuff, but often you have just one, right? So it's really the motivation. Like, the person really has to, love the project, and align really with the mission of our startup. And then if that really works, then, it's always, we are very flexible about the terms and all the, the working conditions, but like, this has to be there, right? So unless they really love Smart Guide, there is no reason why we would ever consider them.
We recently rebranded to Presto. Presto means fast. We are looking for speed. Startups are about speed. If you are young, starting company, you need to learn very fast a lot of new things. So you need to be a fast learner. You need to execute fast, because unless you are fast, you are dead. In the startup philosophy, the passion, for sure. I'm just adding up to the what you said. I think it's very. This is very important feature. It's that the startup business. It's about executing fast, learning fast, thinking fast, and it doesn't mean that thinking fast means that you are wrong. Like, you just need to think and listen to the market. And what we are also looking at it as a personal trait will be how able you are in listening the market and listening people around you, because this is about learning. And if you are just persuaded that you are right and you are going in the right direction and you're the smartest one, then you will eventually hit the wall, because you are not seeing the very small clues that probably the business model is not the best one, and probably the product should be somehow pivoted in a certain direction. And if you don't see that, and if you are just convinced about your truth, this will actually cause you the overall company eventually.
So at the beginning, a lot of people raise their hands that they have some business idea or they are thinking about starting a business. What should be? Yeah. Well, what should be but question to you, what would be your advice? What should be the first steps? How can you validate the idea, or what should you do at all at the very, very beginning?
I have one.
How do you start?
Talk to people. Don't get them signed NDAs before telling you before telling them your idea, because your idea are actually like useless while starting the business. Like what counts is the execution and how well you form the idea and how well you form the execution plan. So like talk to people, share your ideas, like receive the feedback. Don't be shy to talk to investors before they are able to invest. Like talk to them and ask for the feedback to your ideas. This is the best way you can do. Like not just your friends, but be outside of your comfort zone. Like right, hey, you are an investor or angel investor or whoever. I want to check my idea with you, but I understand that you won't invest because I'm in the very, very beginning, but I want to get your opinion. Because like investors meet a lot of companies and they usually get some, or at least they think they have some good ideas about how the business should be going. So talk to people.
I absolutely agree. Like I meet a lot of people who are like, hey, who are super secretive. Like they have the best idea in the world nobody has ever thought of, and they're like, exactly as you said, like let's sign an NDA before I even give you a hint, right? And I'm like, dude, like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but like, really like coming up with something completely groundbreaking nobody has ever thought of in the whole world is very naive, right? Like. You really have to have some, USP, unique selling proposition, but like, it can be just a slight variation, which makes, the thing just different than from what is out there, right? But like, exactly, if it's B2C business, then it's much easier. Just talk to who you think is the target group and like, get some basic feedback, because as Premysl said before, like almost all the startups are actually wrong in the beginning with what they think is the strongest value proposition and to whom, and you really have to somehow get an MVP, working so that you can start talking to the business partners, and then you actually start like listening to them and you refine the idea and the value proposition probably a few times, or if not the value proposition, then the business model, because you find out what people are really willing to pay for, right? So this is the same thing. Like the more feedback you get and more advice you get, the better you form the basic idea before you start writing some complex business plans and preparing everything, right? So I would really do this, and then possibly, as I said, like, okay, you can have solo founders, but again, I would really think, what are the capabilities I don't have, and like, who am I gonna do this with, right? Because exactly, again, as Premysl said, like for me, what really makes a difference after being at many different startup events is the execution, because you need to manage as a CEO to really push all the streams in the company kind of at the same time, because if one gets stuck, the whole thing basically tips and crashes, right? So just to have a great idea is basically kind of, that's the prerequisite. Otherwise, don't really try. But then like you need to build a team and you have to kind of quickly get the processes going so that you manage to push all the streams at the same time.
One more thing. At the very beginning, after talking to a lot of people, as I said, you should focus and obsess on the product. And they're like, when I mean product, I mean like really something that your customers will love and cannot live without. And it could be companies as well, for sure. But like, don't even think about the business model. Like, think about how to create the value for your customers, how to solve the problem before thinking about like revenues and money and whatsoever. Because unless you get the product right, like, nothing is important in the startup. Like that's why I was talking about the tech founders writing the first version of the code themselves, because if I want to create a company and I can create the product myself, that will be the best created product if I'm right, and if I'm solving the right problem, and I'm listening the market and listening to customers and doing the product for them to create the value.
just a short comment on that. Like on the other hand, people say that if you should only release the product to your customers when the CPO is actually satisfied with it, then it's probably 2 years later than you should have, right? So you actually have to get it to the people, to the customers very early to kind of really gauge, get the feedback and so on. So it's just a bit of a joke, right? Because the CEO has to really push the perfectionist CPO to really kind of release it, and that's the whole agile process. Then with the learning, right?
Okay, thank you for this. I think this was super, super useful, even though I saw that the question got you by surprise, because this is probably such trivial for you guys because, you deal with this all the time. But for the people, I think it's just a huge value. So thank you. So we'll have the questions now.
Yeah, actually, I think we can just jump into the questions to the audience. Let's not spend the time on Slido, but just ask whatever you would like to ask.
Can we just quickly add one more thing? Sorry, just to add one more thing, like, besides what we just discussed, I think there is actually, it's much easier to start, to kind of come up with the idea and kind of formulate it better. Like there's so many resources these days. There's so much help out there. Like, honestly, I think it has never been easier, at least in the Czech Republic, to really get a lot of support. You have all these programs by Czech Invest, and so on. You have the specialized, sorry? So it's really like you can get a lot of mentoring, you can get through the universities and so on. So like what I missed, like our CEO, for example, helped here to kind of work together with the students of the CTU 2 years ago at some kind of startup idea generation in the Career Center, and he was more frustrated with the quality of the ideas than really, and they were ready to help and really coach the people, right? So the coaching and all this is there. What we need is more ideas which which are actually interesting.
So questions. Whoever asked on Slido, now you can just ask live.
No, to the audience, just you can raise your hand and ask.
I'll give you the mic.
I would like to ask Premysl if the Presto Venture has some type of coaching program or some accelerator program, because some type of early stages companies which are not ready maybe for a seed funding, there is crucial part of like getting right the product and asking the right questions. And I think like people who are like been successful and have like insights can really help the companies. So that's the question, if like Presto would have some type of coaching. Thanks.
Thanks for the question. I don't believe in coaching in the startup world. Even I don't believe really in mentoring. I believe in giving people money and let them fail, let them try, let them find a way themselves. This is my approach. And I'm doing a lot of like help as well and meeting a lot of entrepreneurs that are not in our stage and trying to help them to proceed. We partner with like early stage funds like Lighthouse Ventures, which like Joao has been here for quite some time. So this is a pre-seed fund investing in angel money or like before us basically. So companies that are not suitable for us to invest, we send them and they are able to invest from like 20k euros to 500k or something like that. And really, I believe in incubators. I believe in people that are able to help the startups, but I fear that there are not many of those people in here. In Czech Republic, there are many very successful, very rich people, but those people are mostly successful from a different business and are not basically successful from the startup business, or very few of them. And if you actually made the money on a different business, then you cannot really help a startup in the very early days because you don't know. You just built a different business and made money on a different stuff. So I would say, like, even it's much more probably helpful to talk to investors and to talk to other startup founders than to mentors and coach that are basically either corporate or consultants or bankers, and they are not really like startup guys who already built a company. So I would say like look for money and learn yourself and not rely on any kind of advice, any kind of help. Like listen to everybody, but it's not about having a good mentor, or like everyone has a mentor somehow, but it's like in the startup, like no one will say you, hey, this is the way how you should build your product. Like this is not true. Like it's your business. You are the entrepreneur, and you should find a way how to do that and how to probably get to the people who will give you the advice. So this is what I would say. But
I think very quickly to this, there are two kinds of mentoring I find valuable. It's really like the very short one where you explain the idea, what you do, and you just ask for the contacts, which is exactly this, so that the people kind of help you through their network to bounce off the idea with someone you would actually never get to, or very, it'd be a lot of work, right? So especially for the B2B startups, that's actually very helpful. And the second thing is, if coaching or mentoring, whatever you want to call it, it's a loss of time if you just spend time with like 3-4 hours with someone, right? So either do this kind of speed dating thing and get a contact, or you need someone for like 20 plus hours on a regular basis. Like we have some of our angel investors who really help us, and we have few hours with them every 2-3 weeks on a specific topic when we have prepared specific stuff, which they are experts on, but that's much later stage than in the beginning, right?
So, more questions? Because I'm getting the signal that we are running out of time. So I will give space to one more if somebody really wants to ask something.
No pressure.
No pressure. No stress.
Well, if not, then I guess you guys will stay around for a few minutes. So if anybody wants to talk, pitch their idea or get some feedback, I think this is a good time to do that. Thank you for spending the time with us, and thank you for joining. And I hope I'll see you at another event.